Did you know that Destiny's Child is making a comeback? Featuring, of course, Beyonce, Kelly Rowlands, and the one whose name nobody remembers or knows. Tickets are on sale in the description box down below, or you can just subscribe to the channel and leave a like on this video and we'll call it even. Now, what inspired this impromptu video? I've been noticing over the last, I'd say, month that people have been increasingly comparing me not just to Candace Owens, but to another fellow YouTuber whom I hadn't heard of, I didn't know until quite recently when I watched a video by the LeftTube critical commentary YouTuber Noah Samson. Long story short, Patience made a video about the new Ariel film being produced by Disney. Her argument was basically that Disney needs to create new original characters, specifically black characters, rather than just replacing and substituting one already existing character for another person of color. Noah responded basically saying in so many words that Patience is really floating on dangerous waters, that her particular stance on black representation is a more political issue and ultimately feeds into far-right and almost neo-Nazi rhetoric online.
But what I do know is that without doing that, in this video, she is presenting a very biased view of this controversy, one that fails to accurately portray the opposing viewpoint that there may be some legitimate concern over the racist origins of this backlash. And so, what's the problem with all this then? Well, see, this sort of bias in online content is how echo chambers form. If an audience member is willing to take Patience at her word, willing to accept the assumption without evidence that the mainstream media is calling everyone racist, willing to believe that no racism is actually occurring, that everyone objecting to the casting is doing so for totally valid reasons, then it's possible that they already have some form of conservative bias or anti-woke disposition. Or if they don't, then this video and subsequent content that will get recommended to them, content that without evidence narrativizes about woke Disney and the epidemic of false racism accusations, that content will help them develop this conservative anti-woke disposition.
And it was very interesting to read the comment sections of both Noah's video as well as Patience's response to his video, because for some reason my name popped up a little bit, and it often popped up alongside references to Candace Owens. And so I got a little bit curious and I thought, right, there must be something very extreme, very out there, very off the beaten track with Patience content for her to be compared to Candace Owens. And obviously there must be something wrong with me if I am being dragged into this as well, when I firstly do not know who Patience is. I have never met Patience. I have never featured in her content, been mentioned in any Instagram stories, nothing. I didn't even know she existed. And I would say that it is vice versa. We're both doing our own thing on YouTube and in life, and that's great. And I wish her nothing but the best. However, I thought that this opened an interesting discussion because I think that this represents something that I find personally quite irksome when it comes to online politics, specifically the online left.
Say my name, say my name.
My name is Kidology, and I make videos about everything and anything to do with modern society. This here lass's name is Patience, and she makes videos about all manner of things. Largely what I've seen, it mainly has to do with commentary, social commentary about events that are happening at the moment, especially racially based ones. For instance, her latest video on the debacle with the royal family and the racist situation going on there was very interesting and very insightful and really brought a different perspective to me. So I found that very interesting and introspective. She additionally makes music. I have listened to some of her songs on Spotify and she is an absolutely phenomenal artist, hence why she is also known as Beyonce. This here American gal is Candace Owens, and I know virtually nothing about her except passing comments. So I thought we'd do a little dive and see how much us three have in common, which therefore make it acceptable to compare us to each other. And obviously the best place to find the most accurate information about anyone is Wikipedia and of course Twitter.
Ladies, it ain't easy being independent.
Controversies. Oh, that looks a bit too deep for me. Let's scroll up to Political views. The political views of Candace Owens. In 2017, Candace Owens began describing herself as a conservative Trump supporter. Okay, well, I can make this brief. I have never supported Donald Trump on my channel or in person. I have never found that I have anything remotely in common with Donald Trump or his politics, philosophy, or business ethics. Insofar as being conservative, no, I am not conservative, not even when it comes to conservative with a small c. I am apolitical. I do not engage in politics. I do not care. I am a minority in the country that I live in. My political voice is literally non-existent, and I'm okay with that because thankfully my human rights, my individual rights are protected, and I am a devout individualist, and I am very much invested in the private sphere of life as opposed to the public sphere. That's all a bit too chaotic. I like learning about it, I like reading about it, I like engaging with it, but I won't go out of my way to change it beyond, well, sitting in my room talking to a camera. Actually, no, talking to you. Yes, you. As far as I could tell from watching some of Patient's videos, especially her videos about reacting to assumptions about her.
The reason why I don't identify with anything is just because I believe in order for me to be a true free thinker, I need to view myself as an individual as opposed to viewing myself as being part of a larger group. Because I've noticed that something weird happens to some people when they start identifying with one particular political group. They start losing their individuality and they start developing more of like a hive mind.
I don't get the sense that she is a conservative. I think she is, alongside me, apolitical, not really engaged in politics of the left or the right, especially not in the very Americanized sense of the word. Owens has since characterized Trump as the savior of Western civilization. Again, Owens has said the left hates America and Trump loves it. Again, have to disagree. I think that the left loves a particular idea of America and of the world, and I would say that Trump doesn't love America. He loves money. Abortion. Owens opposes abortion. While as a devout individualist, I am most definitely for abortion. Owens is critical of feminism. Okay, we may have something in common there. However, I get the impression that she's critical of feminism because she is anti-feminism, whereas I am a feminist, a philosophical feminist. I am most definitely a feminist, but I am critical of feminist politics and its political agenda, at least contemporarily. Sort of third wave feminism I'm quite critical of. Owens described the hashtag #MeToo movement, an international movement against sexual harassment and assault, as stupid, and said that she hated it. I would not go as far to say that I think that it is stupid or that I hated it. I think that obviously with anything that involves a virtual movement, I think it is doomed to fail. I think it is doomed to come into conflict with itself because we are very new to organization and organizing and activism through the internet and on a global scale, like we see with, for instance, the hashtag #MeToo movement. So I don't think it was stupid. I think it was important for a lot of women, and I think that it really opened the eyes of many in society to what women have to endure. LGBT rights. Owens supports same-sex marriage. Well, I do too. Climate change. Owens has claimed that global warming is not real. Well, it is real, in my opinion. Oh, goodness. Welfare. Owens opposes welfare programs, saying that they are a Democratic Party tool to keep Black Americans dependent upon the government. Well, again, I am very pro-welfare and very pro the welfare state, and I think it is one of the greatest assets to a functioning society in a modern context. Now for some light-hearted fun. What's the one conspiracy theory that no matter what anyone says, you believe is true? Mine is that the moon landing in '69 was completely faked. Just nothing about it makes sense, especially NASA accidentally erasing the original footage. The biggest thing for me is the fuel tank size, plus the live broadcast with audio from the moon. In '69, I just cannot. Again, we must agree to disagree. I definitely believe in the moon landing. I don't think it was a conspiracy at all. And I think it was a significant moment in history. So there you go. So as far as I can tell from this brief summary and overview of Candace Owens' political dealings and hotter takes, we don't seem to have anything in common. And additionally, based on my watching of Patient's videos, I don't feel that she has anything in common with Candace either, unless I'm missing something. And so this gets me onto why I think people are so intent on reviving Destiny's Child.
But I gotta break this bad habit.
This is indeed a bad habit. The only reason why people say that Patience, myself, and Candace are in any way associated with each other is because we are, in the most simplistic and menial terms, black women who don't abide by the stereotype, expectations, and assumptions of what a politicized modern black woman ought to be. And alongside that, we also all have an established following, with Candace following being absolutely through the roof. And because of that, relative inevitably to the majority of modern black women, we have online clout within our spheres. When we talk, a lot more people tend to listen and tune in. And this has made a lot of people a little upset, as well as shown some interesting colours, because the response seems quite contradictory. Because firstly, we are allegedly living in an age in which individuality is sacrosanct, in which individuality ought to be cherished and promoted, especially for minorities and disadvantaged groups, generically disadvantaged groups. Yet on the other hand, when that individuality and freedom of thought is expressed by such individuals, that is immediately condemned when it doesn't align to the majority or the most popular or mainstream view within particular circles. With us on YouTube. And it's so much easier to, instead of engaging with us as individuals, individually with our own very diverse, in no way corresponding perspective on a variety of different social, political, economic, philosophical issues, to merely reduce us to our physical traits and the fact that we don't conform to what is expected by just our external appearance. And to then lump us into a group and call us all the most insulting reference to an individual possible in modern political language, which is, well, Candace Owens, or conservative, or alt-right. Super glad people in your comment section are calling you out. You have good takes, but your thoughts on Jordan Peterson and incel/red pill culture were extremely disturbing at best. Also, I don't know what it is with people like you and Patience that have these horrible takes on feminism. I have never comprehensively or in total put forward my opinions on Jordan Peterson. I think he is a public intellectual. I don't agree with him on everything that he does. I don't agree with everything put forward in his books, but I find him interesting, and I think that he is a far better role model for young men and modern men than a lot of what is out there on offer. I must say I'm not familiar with Patient's take on feminism, but in terms of my take on feminism, I am a feminist. I'm very pro female liberation, the equality of men and women in terms of access to opportunity, and the philosophy of feminism not only intrigues me but is a part of me. So I can't help you there, I'm afraid. Wow, Patience reminds me so much of Kidology, someone who also has bad takes and gets so much on my nerves because of her centrist apolitical bullshit and posh snobby attitude and not acknowledging her privileges. I get upset and angry when thinking about it. And she suffers from internalized racism. Okay. Ooh, a lot to unpack there. Right. I think it's sad and worrying that in this day and age, having a different or contrary take is equated to a bad take, not agreeing with what is typically said, and having questions or arguing against or putting forward an alternative analysis is deemed as a bad take. I think we're using this idea of a bad take a little too liberally now, and I think we do that in order to get people in line, to get them to conform to how we want them to think and what we want them to say. My apoliticism also isn't bullshit. It is how I identify and choose to identify, and I, like anybody in this world, have the right to politically or apolitically identify as I choose, at least insofar as my ideas and perspective on such matters are concerned. It is incredibly patronizing to tell somebody that how they identify politically is invalid or completely wrong, or that they are actually this, even though they say and know themselves to be that. And this is something that I saw time and again on Patient's channel and in her comment section. And it's interesting because I don't see it nearly as much, if at all, on the YouTube channel of Abba and Preach. It seems perfectly acceptable to go to the channels of your stereotypical black woman who does not have the opinion of the masses, say, on an issue, and to call her out and to say that she is causing some kind of shame or ridicule or spreading some kind of dangerous message to people. With regards to my posh, snobby attitude, as well as not acknowledging my privileges, I am so sorry. I cannot help that I talk like this. This is my accent. This is how I talk. And you know what? It isn't actually even a British accent through and through. It's a mixture of English South African, or the British South African, as well as, well, my living in the UK for several years now. And I do get this a lot, even in person, this idea that I have a snobby attitude, that I look down on people. I think it has to do with how I approach things and people, just being very open-minded and very willing to hear the other side, or to, I guess, in a way, add the perspective of the other side. And I think that it's very easy nowadays to try to, again, shut somebody down by saying that they are posh, that they are snobby, that they are rich. And that really tends to shut people up, or to put them in a corner so that, you know, the people with the right opinion can have the stage. And so I get it, but in all good faith and based on just how I feel, I am not trying to be snobby. I'm not trying to be posh. This is just how I speak. I've lived in the south of England, where most people speak like this, arguably not with as much diction, but I am an English whiz. I love the English language. I studied English language and English literature in sixth form, and I very much appreciate grammar. I just like it. And so it is what it is. Growing up in the households that I grew up in, having a good grasp of the English language and speaking well, speaking concisely, was always very important and promoted. And it is something that matters to me, but I do not project that onto other people. I don't correct people's grammar. I do not care to correct people's grammar. I do not mind people speaking in slang. Of course, I hardly ever understand it, but language is a fruitful, diverse thing. It's ever-changing, and I think we need to appreciate that. That is the beauty of grammar. That is the beauty of language. It's never still. It's an organ, and I am very excited to see where language takes us. I do think I'm quite self-aware about my privileges. I think I live in a very safe area. I am financially self-sufficient because of YouTube and my very generous patrons. I can read, I can write, I play sports, I can get around easily. I live a very full life. And like everyone, I have privileges, but I also don't have some privileges. I don't have a family. I get depressed. Life. I spend most of my time alone. So, it's... We all have our problems, is what I'm saying. This idea of my suffering from internalized racism, and also in comment sections, in patients' videos, as well as in mine, being referred to as an Oreo. This idea of being basically white on the outside, no, white on the inside and black on the outside is interesting. I find it quite disheartening, I guess, that we are at this stage, especially I would say on the political left, who tend to be a lot more progressive, a lot more, I would just say, enlightened or willing to really go with enlightened thinking than other factions of the political spectrum, say. So I find it disheartening when the fact that I have just had a very abnormal upbringing and was raised transracial and transracially raised, that is then deemed as my having internalized racism. That makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. I'm actually currently editing a video about transracialism and about the actual validity of transracialism as an identity, not just for individuals who are transracially adopted, but also for individuals now and historically who identified as transracial. But I think this idea and this assumption that it is about internalized racism is incredibly misleading. Categorically, I think, at least for the individual cases of prominent transracials that I have studied and been researching, it is misleading, very misleading. Just based on where I grew up, I saw that in South Africa, for instance, it was not just Black people who lived in abject poverty and were discriminated against. It was far more nuanced than that, far more complex than that. And this is something that we do find very, very difficult in this day and age, so I don't blame anyone for this. But I think it's important to talk about nonetheless. White poverty is also a thing, both in the United Kingdom and in South Africa. Acknowledging that, saying that, and talking about how we can find a solution to that should not be deemed as trying to grift or trying to cater to or trying to be accepted by whites. Personally, I sometimes have my very low moments. Of course, everybody has their low moments of self-doubt, of feeling like they are inadequate. And I definitely had that as a child, constantly. As an adult, not so much now, and it's definitely something that I am daily working on. But in terms of sort of being subsumed in wanting the approval of white people, I mean, that's incredibly just far-fetched. I don't seek the approval of anybody. I'm not seeking the approval of any group. I seek the approval of individuals, exceptional individuals that I know personally, that I've humanized, who care for me and whom I care for. Those are the only people whose approval I care for at all. It really doesn't matter if you are Black or if you are white. I really don't see groups, and I don't like to think about things in groups. Of course, we have to make generalizations, at least to start off with, as at least our sort of foundation, and then we work from that. And it's always important to work from that and away from that. And I feel that this is something, at least going on some of Patient's videos, something that we do have in common in terms of looking at individuals and caring a lot more about the individual experience as opposed to the group experience and the politicized group experience. I don't try to appeal to racist white people. I don't try to grift from the white community or what have you. I am just a lass who reads a lot of books, a lot of articles, watches far too many episodes of The Golden Girls and documentaries, and has opinions about a lot of those things. My opinions change constantly. I'm willing and open to having my opinions changed, but nobody is going to change your opinion by invalidating your thinking self and being. Nobody's going to change my opinion by telling me that I am actually just a white sympathizer, that I'm internally racist, that I'm snobby, that I'm actually a coveted conservative or alt-right sympathizer, that I'm Candace Owens. Because firstly, absolutely none of that is true when we actually go beyond just the stereotypical assumptions. And it just falls into the racialized stereotypes and assumptions, which allegedly we are trying to get away from.
His brown eyes tell me so.
Oh yes, we all have brown eyes as well, so maybe that's another thing. I'm so sorry. Correction all. The fact that somebody claimed in my last video that they feel betrayed by me, a black person, because I'm not portraying blackness in the way that is the majority black experience. I think that upset is very misplaced. I think it's upsetting because it really just points to this really fundamental issue which I am seeing on YouTube, which is the inability to distinguish between American real-world issues and the rest of the world, and how completely different it is to America. Now, I think what is interesting about myself and Patience is that we are both based in England. Our culture, our racial politics is very different, incredibly different to that of American racial politics. And I think there is this very hard time with a lot of online politics, particularly that of, I would say, the online left, insofar as being the far more reachable faction of American politics, in which the online left tends to want to, I think unintentionally, replace this idea of colonialism or Eurocentrism with modern Americanism, and this idea that African American political concerns and issues are or ought to be considered universally and as important and integral and as much of a lived experience to individuals who are not African American or are not confronted by the same political issues as Americans. And I think this is just because YouTube is American based, it is US based, it is predominantly US viewers and content creators. The vast majority of my viewers are American, that is from the US. And so I can most definitely understand a projection of an American or US perspective onto my takes and onto my videos. But this is why I say it's so important to be nuanced and to, of course, start from a position of projecting, but then to always question that projection and always question those assumptions and those assertions. Because I have a very different experience with racism and race relations compared to Patience, compared to, of course, Candace Owens. We three are all individuals. Just like Beyonce is not Kelly Rowlands and Kelly Rowlands is not Beyonce. Beyonce isn't the one who nobody knows and Kelly isn't the one who nobody knows, and vice versa. Actually, I'm probably going to find that everybody knows exactly who the other Destiny's Child is, but And I think the politicization of everyday life is a very US-based characteristic and feature. And I do understand this in the context of the US. I don't, however, understand that in the context of modern Britain, especially when it comes to race relations, at least. Because in the UK, for instance, people of color outperform working class white students by a long shot. In the UK, it is no secret that the working class are ignored and have been since the 1980s. And this working class is predominantly white. I think a lot of issues in the UK are far more class-based and very deep-rooted in classism and class relations as opposed to race relations. And because we have a royal family and the royal institution, which is very powerful and very influential and is sort of in a weird way a unifying force between the classes, it tends to be quite difficult to navigate this conversation. And I mean, you know, the British are just the British. Everything is either incredibly passive-aggressive or discussed over a pot of tea. And so I think this is an interesting time for online politics and online political discourse to really reckon with the oversaturation of the American perspective. Because as the rest of the world gets richer, as globalization takes hold, especially virtual globalization in more countries, especially in countries with a far younger demographic who are going to be and are already tech savvy, their perspectives and their opinions are going to be increasingly online. And the majority of the world is not actually left-leaning or left-wing in the way that we see today on YouTube. The vast majority of the world is most definitely not on board with a lot of my opinions, let alone that of the extreme tenets of the left. And so I think in order to navigate that and in order to make that transition period as smooth a transition as possible, we are going to have to learn to compromise, to understand and to talk to each other and to empathize with each other. At the moment, I don't think the online political divides and discourse, specifically that on YouTube, are ready for the revival of not just Destiny's Child, but everything that it represents, namely different perspectives, different opinions, and different political leanings and affiliations coming online and gaining an audience and traction.
I don't think you can handle this.
I don't think they can handle this. But I am hopeful that at some point, hopefully sooner rather than later, we can handle this. So yes, I will kindly ask that you stop comparing me to Candace Owens and also to Patience. I think that Patience is doing a great job on her channel in her own right. I don't think there are very many similarities between myself and Patience or between our content. We're just two people online having a good time some of the time. And I think that's all that really needs to be said. Of course, I'm all for a good Candace Owens meme or joke. I'm definitely not saying don't joke about it. It's all good fun. But in terms of seriously comparing me to Candace Owens, I don't think that helps anybody, least of all you. Politics is far more complex than that, far more nuanced, far more in-depth than that. And I think we do a disservice to ourselves by considering it to be anything but. But anyway, that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching this very impromptu, very off the script, off the cuff video. I really do appreciate your time. Thank you as always to my fantastic patrons, and I will see all of you very soon in the next one.